compare that to the figure by Zamstats, it means that actually the only surplus is 116,000 metric tons. If the surplus in Zambia is going to be 116,000 metric tons, where is the 500,000 metric tons coming from which they will export? Remember also that the figures they're talking about, government is saying 500,000 metric tons that will be exported through the formal sector. But remember that Zambia also exports maize through the informal sector. Farmers in the outlying areas export maize without government having a record of it. And that maize they will be exporting is coming from the projected output of 3,600. So the truth of the matter is that Zambia does not have any surplus. Remember also that if projected production is 3,655,000, the farmers will not sell every grain. No, the farmers are smart. They will also have some in reserve. So there is no way that government can expect to receive 4 million metric tons. They cannot even receive the 3,655,000 metric tons because they have to first export in the informal sector and secondly keep some for their own domestic use. What is even more worrying is that the minister in the statement on behalf of government said that whereas they are expecting this surplus, which again is fallacious, like I said, it's a political surplus, the government acknowledges that there's going to be a deficit, in rice. A deficit of 55,000 metric tons in rice. A deficit of 327,938 metric tons in wheat. A deficit of 636,000 metric tons in cassava flour. If you're going to have those deficits, what does that mean? It will mean that the pressure on maize will increase. Because when you talk about the consumption of 3,500,000, it is because the other food on the market will be rice, will be cassava meal, will be wheat. In the absence of these complementary products, what will that mean? It will mean that people will now go more for the available maize. Because they can't have rice because it's in short supply. They can't have cassava because it's in short supply. They can't have bread because wheat is in short supply. The alternative will be maize. So the pressure on that 3.6 million metric tons maize will be huge. You also want to discuss the issue of what is maize. Maize is Zambia's staple food. And as a staple food, it is part of your national security. In the same way as fuel, in the same way as energy is a matter of security, maize being a staple food, you would want to hold strategic reserves for the period that it will take for you to import maize from outside in the event that you have a drastic weather condition. And that normally, the lead period for importing maize from Mexico, for instance, where we normally import maize from when we have shortfall in Zambia, it will take you 3 months. So you ought to make sure that you have no less than 3 months of strategic reserves in your warehouses. But prudent governments even consider not only the lead period for the importation of maize. Instead, they look at the whole season. That let us have in stock sufficient stocks, sufficient food, so that in the event that next year we have a drastic rain pattern, we will have enough food to feed our people for the whole year until the next season. And this is exactly what we did in the Patriotic Front. By the time that UPND were taking over government, we had in stocks, in reserves, sufficient maize to last us for more than a year. That's how prudent governments plan. But this government is already telling us that even if they don't have sufficient maize stock to even last 1 year, they still are going to export. They have a very great appetite for trading. They always look at governance from the perspective of business. Government is not business. No, government is about holding the integrity of the country and ensuring that you have security. And security is not on and above this. I was checking to see what is the outlook for 2026 insofar as maize production is concerned. And I stumbled over a report called the Zambia Maize Industry Outlook 2022 to 2026. And your viewers can check this. These days, you cannot talk about things that people can't verify. People can just Google now. They can Google as I speak. They can Google the Zambia Maize Industry Outlook 2022-2026. That report projects that there will be a decline in maize production from the current 3.5 million projection for 2025 to 2.1 million in 2026. Okay? What that means is that in 2026, you should anticipate a shortfall, a deficit on maize supply of 1.4 million metric tons. What should the government do given this information? They actually must be preparing themselves, that they must create a buffer of no less than 1.4 million to cover the anticipated deficit in 2026. If I were in this government, I would have said, no, we are not exporting not a grain. Instead of supplying foreign countries, instead of supplying our neighboring countries, let us first look at ensuring that even next year, our people will have access. Now, I have heard, I've seen boasting everywhere. Boasting, we have made a bumper harvest. I would like to propose to Zambians that we must encourage the UPND to ensure that progress is rooted in policy, not in propaganda. And they are boasting 3.5 million metric tons as though this is the first time that Zambia is producing 3.5 metric tons. I would like to remind Zambians that, as a matter of fact, the PF in 2020, no, not even 2020, 2021, that was the first time Zambia produced a bumper harvest of 3.6 million metric tons. And at that time, we had 1.6 million metric tons surplus, because then Zambia's consumption was 2.5 million metric tons. We had 1.6 surplus. In that year, we sold 600,000 metric tons and kept 1 million metric tons in reserve. Okay, that was 2020, 2021. 3.6. Even before that, in 2019, 2020, we produced 3.4 million metric tons. The UPND government last year produced 1.5 million metric tons. And yes, it was because of a drought. But this must be a lesson to us as Zambians, that there could be a drought. And we have these projections, like I indicated, which show that next year we must not look forward to a bumper harvest. Next year, we will have a shortfall of 1.4 million metric tons. And I would like to suggest that rather than boast of this mirage the government should focus on delivering actual results, not inflated projections. 4 million. Where is the 4 million coming from, Minister of Agriculture? Some stats are telling us it's only 3.5. Where are you getting the extra? Please give us actual results. Secondly, you must be telling us how you're going to build resilience to climate shocks. That's what you must be telling the farmers. You must be telling the farmers that you are coming up with prudent distribution of inputs. Go and give inputs for the production of crops in areas where there is sufficient rain to produce those crops. We were told that no, we are distributing inputs in an unfair manner. No, we were distributing inputs following the rain pattern. That is how come we decided to come up with the electronic voucher system. And in areas where people have enough rain to produce maize, that is where we're giving them fertilizers and giving them maize seed. In areas where we realize that maize can't grow, we didn't want to deny farmers support. But we also didn't want to go and force them to produce maize which they couldn't grow. To go to areas that are deserts and give them maize seed and give them fertilizer in sand is a waste. We came up with the electronic voucher system so that farmers could select any other agricultural enterprise that they would engage in. So government must be telling us that they are going to improve the distribution of inputs and that they are also going to create market equity for those products. Over and above that, talking about building resilience to climate shocks, time has come for Zambia to continue on what the PF started, building dams, irrigation dams in various places. Your viewers may be aware of the fact that by the time we were leaving government, we had already invested in building dams. The Mwomboshi Dam, for example, the Lufwanyama Dam, which was recently launched with the pomp and splendor, that was our project. The Kalulushi Dam, the Chikankata Dam, that is what we must be hearing from government, and not this rhetoric and boasting. So the bottom line is that please, Zambians, don't be misled that we have sufficient maize and that Zambia must export maize. Zambia doesn't have sufficient stocks of maize to export. And all of us must stand up and demand that this decision must be rescinded. Let Zambia's maize be used for strategic purposes, for strategic reserves, so that even next year we have access to our own maize, rather than being entrapped in the scandals of importing maize. The same maize that we exported, we start importing it at an inflated price. We must avoid that.
Clearly, Acting President, you've passed a vote of no confidence in the decision of by government to export maize as announced by the New Dawn administration. But again, are you able to give them a bit of some accolades in that in the manner they've managed the agriculture sector from the time you left it yourself as the former Minister of Agriculture, taking advantage of your presence and your experience as well? But again, you realize that I do remember very well that when President Hakainde Hichilema was in the opposition, something that he kept on emphasizing to the farmers, and the farmers are watching the program right now, was that when we come into power, we shall ensure that business, farming will not just be, regarded as a consumption. Farming will be treated as business. We want the farmers out here to get, a stable income and to get the dividends they deserve out of their labor. And indeed, when the UPND came in power, what came out from the system, the government coffers, was that you left a group of farmers who had not been paid. They supplied their maize to the government through FRA, Food Reserve Agency, and your government failed to pay them. When the UPND came, they had to, inherit that burden to clear everybody. Hence the noise that you brought about, that you cannot sell the maize which we left in the reserve, you know. And the government said, look, you are the same people who gave us this burden to clear the farmers who have not been cleared. Fast forward, that is gone. We are at a point where the UPND say, assured Zambians that regardless of the drought we have, no citizen is going to die with the hunger. And indeed, we have not received any report of somebody dying as a result of hunger or poverty, as it were. Don't you think that the UPND really deserve, you know, some accolades somehow?
I don't think that they deserve any accolades from anyone whatsoever. None. Because we also explained when they raised the issue that we hadn't paid the farmers, we indicated that they should bring the yellow book and show whether there was no allocation in the yellow book for maize purchase through FRA. Money was allocated in the budget, in the national budget, for the payment to farmers. And also remember that food reserve is not the responsibility of the farmer. It is the responsibility of the government. So in agreeing with making agriculture and making farming a business, you also ought to come up with a question. Once the prices of maize increase, then also the prices of midi meal are bound to increase. Where does the government step in? That is the reason why you have the Farmer Input Support Program to subsidize the farmers, so that the cost of production by the small-scale farmer is reduced because the inputs are coming from government. What is that called? It's an input subsidy. The government subsidizes production. Because the government is subsidizing production, you also expect that the price at which the commodity, which has been subsidized in its production, will reduce, so that you also have a positive impact on the consumer, so that there is no one in the country who fails to access their staple food. Talking about nobody having died in Zambia of hunger. Yes, we have not gone into starvation. We haven't. But the reason we have not gone into starvation is not because there is easy access to the staple food. We're just a lucky country that there are various other food commodities that people can access. You and I know, and your viewers know, that there is a period when people survive on green mangoes. There's a period when people survive only on pumpkins, because their maize is still in the field. There's a period when people survive on alternatives to maize. That does not mean that you are food secure, because here we're talking about the staple food. But I'll also borrow from what President Hakainde said when he was in Namwala. He told the people in Namwala, please make sure that when you have leftover food in the evening, don't give it to the dogs. Don't throw it away. Keep it for you to warm in the morning. Put it on the fire in the morning and eat chimbala. What motivated the president to say that to the Zambians? It is because he himself accepted the fact that there isn't sufficient food, against his promise. Because his promise was, once I form government, everyone will have 3 square meals a day. Is chimbala in the morning part of the 3 square meals a day? No. And if they were saying that they sold maize, which they found in the food reserves in 2021 because we hadn't paid, okay, why are they selling now? What is motivating them to sell now? If they themselves have paid farmers, why are they selling when we don't have enough stocks? This habit by UPND to continue to refer to the past, to continue to blame PF for their failures, is a mark of failure in itself. I've said this to some people. I've given them the analogy of the Bible. When Adam committed the first sin, When God asked him, Adam, what have you done? What did he say? He did not take responsibility. He said, this woman that you created for me, she's the one who led me into temptation. And when God turned to Eve, Eve, what did you do? What did she say? God, it is not me, it is this snake that you created. I'm sure that if God asked the snake would have said, it is you, God. You know, and that is a mark of total irresponsibility. A leader must be willing to take responsibility for the outcomes of their policies, the outcomes of their decisions. You cannot continue to blame others, because that shows that you yourself are not focused. A prudent leader takes responsibility and also inspires his people. President Hakainde is not doing that. The UPND government is not doing that by constantly referring to PF. They cannot blame the PF for load shedding. No. When we were in government, what was the average load shedding period? For them it is kwenyu over nothing. They go in the kwenyula at a dam which was built by PF. They kwenyu. And then when they fail, they blame it on the PF. How come you don't go to Kazungula Bridge and say, this is a beautiful bridge that was built by PF? Instead, you go there and say, this is our money, this is well spent money. When you fail to feed the people, you say a PF. Now even climate change is being blamed on PF. There is climate challenge now because of PF. Why? What has PF got to do with it? 4 years along the line, you are still drunk with the punches of PF, with the successes of PF. No.
Let's get to the energy sector, which we've just talked about in brief. And it's been 3 years of load shedding, or more than 2 years of the load shedding in the country. And this is a problem again, which can be attributed to you, the Patriotic Front, because this problem, you left it and it has continued. I think I remember 2018, we endured a very, catastrophic, season where the drought, load shedding is concerned. There were strides which you made and you promised Zambians that you're going to get rid of the load shedding, but well, lo and behold, you were kicked out of power. In 2021, the UPND comes in. Equally, President Hakainde Hichilema, the UPND, they pledged that we are going to end load shedding within a short period of time. Alas, here we are again, still enduring in this load shedding. Where have we gone wrong? Where did we miss it as a country? The reasons we are getting from the current administration is that this is because of the past administrations who did not heavily invest into the energy sector. Again, you are here sitting as a former leader, especially you in particular, Honorable Lubinda. You've stayed longer in government, with massive experience, but you could not use experience to advise the successful leaders or presidents to end the load shedding. What do we go wrong as a nation? Before that, let me play a clip of the Minister of Information and Media, Honorable Mwetwa, who of course talked about the load shedding, and of course Zambians were anticipating that at least by June this year, load shedding was going to start slowing down. Let's have this clip.
So we urge our citizens that they remain calm. We can see light at the end of the tunnel, and that tunnel is now becoming shorter by the day. As we speak, we now have unprecedented rains in the last maybe 2 decades. And with those rains, yesterday Cabinet was informed that load shedding is likely to begin to diminish by June 2025. This is because the major water catchment areas of northwestern province into the Barotse, plains, and now also the Kafue, flood plains. Water takes 3 months journey to move from Kaleni Hills, from Chavuma, into Victoria Falls, into Kariba. 3 solid months. Water moves very slowly in the plains because it's flat. This water which you see when it rains here in Lusaka, we are going for work at ZNBC. Then you find that water is running fast. It's here in Lusaka. But the water needed to change the electricity situation or the water level situation in the Kariba or Kafue Gorge, upper and lower, or Iteshiteji, moves very slow because once it gets to the plains are flat, so water velocity for overland flow of water is reduced. And that is why the experts have said they have not yet done a full measure because they are waiting for the water. But their projections from their readings at their reading stations in Chavuma and Victoria Falls, and I think there's one in somewhere in the Western Province, indicates an exponential rise in water, but they are not yet speaking with certainty because they believe in empirical data. And therefore, we are also a government that believes in numbers, because numbers don't lie. So the experts yesterday from Zambezi River Authority updated cabinet that it is their anticipation that by June, load shedding will begin to de-escalate. I thought it was important.
My guest on the program is Credit Front Acting President, who is also Tonse Alliance Chairperson, Honorable Givene Lubinda, former Minister of Justice, former Minister of Agriculture, as well as former Minister of Tourism. He joins me on set. President Lubinda, when you listen to that clip, you realize that Zambians feel a bit, disturbed. I don't know where you, the politicians, are taking this country. There was a promise by Honorable Mwetwa that by June this year, load shedding will begin to diminish or begin to slow down. But this problem is still with us up to now. A few days ago, we were told that actually the opposite has happened. The number of hours have again increased, contrary to what is being pronounced. But again, here you are. You are crying out the loudest as the former ruling party. The question is, why didn't you end the load shedding, or why didn't you put in measures that could have ended the load shedding?
Thank you, AP. I like the statement that Cornelius Mwetwa made when he said numbers don't lie. If you check your statistics, you will see that when PF formed government in 2011, Zambia's power generation capacity was only 1.6 million megawatts. By 2021, when we're leaving government, we had doubled it to 3.2. That's doubling. Had we continued in government over these last 4 years, I can assure you that our program, our plans in the energy sector, by now we should have been talking about producing no less than 4 million megawatts of power. And that can be seen from the program that we left in place. All the power stations that we wanted to construct, the solar plants that we wanted to construct. Had we been in government now, the issue of load shedding should have been a thing of the past. So I've given you empirical evidence that we put in a lot of effort from 1.6 to 3.2 within a period of 10 years. That is 800 megawatts every 5 years. These 5 years, we could have added another 800.
For how long does it take, or should it take, for a government to invest into the energy sector and perhaps reduce or end load shedding? How much time
I've demonstrated to you.
Yes, you have demonstrated to me.
In 10 years, we increased by 1.6 million megawatts. In 10 years. And that's what I'm explaining, that in 5 years, if you prorate it, in 5 years it was 800.
So can we say that also the UPND, maybe we should give them enough time, another 5-year mandate for them to maybe do what you did?
In the last
do they deserve another?
In the last 4 years, what have they increased? Zero. Completely zero. Why even waste time giving them even... You can even give this UPND government 100 years. They will not achieve anything. Because basically the UPND government is a government that is fixated on false promises. Cornelius Mwetwa, in that report that you showed the viewers, what was he doing? Huh? Speaking as though he was an authority. And even saying the people from Zambezi River Authority, they came and informed us. The water velocity and what. Like he's talking to grade 2 children. He's talking to the nation, for heaven's sake. But the trouble is that basically the challenge we have is the UPND's lack of respect for citizens. Lack of regard for Zambians. Because they think that they can make all sorts of promises, they can talk about mountains when they can't even deliver anthill malls. You yourselves, the viewers, heard Cornelius Mwetwa saying by June the load shedding would de-escalate. What has happened now? Now we are being told that we must prepare ourselves for 19 hours of load shedding. Is that de-escalation? In the language of UPND, yes, kwenyu. Yes, kwenyu, Mr. Cornelius Mwetwa, kwenyu. You said very well, kwenyu. We are kwenyulating you. But the Zambian people are going to kwenyula you in 2026 for all these false promises. But you also remember, and I'm sure that your viewers remember, that soon after they formed government, what did they say? They said how important it was for them to export power for the sake of maintaining external markets of power. That if we don't export, those markets will be taken over by other producers of power. And when we have surplus, we'll have nowhere to sell our excess power. So we must continue to sell power to the neighboring countries. You are telling the Zambians that for the sake of future production of power, you must starve them of their own power. Those operators of saloons, those operators of welding shops, those operators of tuntemba who depend on power, if you destroy their income levels now, you destroy their enterprise now because you are selling power to Namibia in anticipation that in 5 years you have more power than you need, will they still be there for them to come and enjoy that excess power? Of course not. What you have literally done is to export jobs from your own country, to export livelihood from your own country. Now, this statement was not made by PF. This statement was not made by Tonse. This statement was made by UPND. They are on record as having said, let us continue to export. But you also remember, and your viewers remember, the Namibian official who came to Zambia visiting the vice president. I'm sure that the vice president was really embarrassed when that person just said to her, Madam, thank you very much. Even when you have a shortage of power here, you are selling power which we are using to electrify our rural areas. Namibia's rural areas are having access to power when even your urban centers in Zambia don't have access to power. This is the reason I'm emphasizing the major challenge we have is that the UPND has no respect for Zambians. The UPND has no regard for Zambians. The UPND has only regard for money, for wealth. That's the only thing they're interested in, wealth. This can also be looked upon from what Cornelius himself said. With tongue in cheek. By June, This is middle of August. We're getting to the end of August. Is Mr. Cornelius Mwetwa's water blocked somewhere? He was telling us there is a flow. 3 months. 3 months, Bwana, has elapsed. Have you seen where the water is now seeping? It's not going into the Kariba. Maybe it is caught somewhere. Tell us. Maybe the water now has been caught somewhere. This also reminds me, you remember, of the story, of the strange story of damming water from Chambesh. The UPND told us, we're going to create canals all the way from Chambesh to take water down, up and down the mountains, bring it to come and feed the Zambezi so that we generate power in Kariba. My foot, who does that? The amount of investment in that canal to bring water from Chambeshi is so enormous. You can use it to create dams in Wapula, to create dams in Northern Province, to generate power in Wapula, to generate power in Northern Province, to create employment in Wapula and in Northern Province. Generate power there and send it where it's required. Why do you have to take the resource from there and take it to Kariba? Why? Again, it shows you how this government has no respect, no regard for citizens. They tell you all such long stories. They tell tales. And you expect that I should sit here and accept when they say we did not invest in power generation? No. The records are there. We invested more than any other government, more than the UNIP government, more than the MMD government. Because when we took over power, like I said, our generation capacity was 1.6. We brought it to 3.2. That 1.6 was power generation started by the colonial masters. Okay? Added to by Kaunda. Added to by MMD. All these governments only produced 1.6. And we, in the PF, in 10 years, we generated an additional 1.6. And when we come back in 2026, I can assure you, but that within the first year, we will start the process of increasing generation of power, because we know that our economy is growing. And with the exponential growth in the economy, the demand for power also grows.
Did you just say when you come back in 2026?
We are coming back.
What makes you sure that you come back next year?
Because we're working towards that. We're putting in place everything to ensure that we come back in 2026.
What is in place, Honorable Lubinda, President of the PF? Really, you are the same man. We predicted your victory in 2021, that you are going to win. And you were on TV in the same manner you are speaking right now, that come 2021, we're going to win. And we'll come back here and say Waniala.
Yes.
What has happened today?
We
you are in opposition. Again, you are pledging, making another assurance that come next year you are going to win the election. We
have learned our lessons. And the Zambians have also learned their lessons. The Zambians who voted for UPND have come to the realization that they voted for a mirage. They voted out of deception. They were deceived. Those young graduates who went to vote with their gowns were actually voting out PF because they thought that what the UPND were telling them was the truth. When the UPND told them that when we come into power, there will be jobs for everybody, they believed them. And now, where are they? Are they employed? No, they are not. When they told them that as soon as we vote, you vote us in power, 10 o'clock, the dollar will be 10 kwacha. Is it 10 kwacha today? No. And now they're even bragging that the kwacha is 22 kwacha to the dollar because of the improvement in our economy. No, that is not true. The reason why the kwacha seems to be gaining strength is basically because you're comparing it to a weakening dollar. The dollar itself as a trading currency is being weakened because of all the Trump issues. All these tariffs that the Trump administration is bringing in is working against the dollar. So if you're going to put the two on the scale and one is lowering in value, and because of that yours seems to be gaining value, and you say that we have improved the economy, no, you have not, sir.
Let's talk about the rule of law and its implementation as well as adherence in the last 4 years of the New Dawn administration. What is your general overview in this regard? Again,
rhetoric. Total rhetoric. What rule of law is there in this country today? Rule of law in a country where the ruling party can go about having rallies and talking to people and campaigning, and yet opposition political parties are not allowed. Is that the rule of law? The rule of law where the same law applies differently depending on where on the political divide you belong, and you call it rule of law. Huh? If I was to call somebody in the ruling party a Lucifer, it would be hate speech. If Secretary General of UPND calls another person a Lucifer like he called Archbishop Alec Banda, the matter is not even listened to. You are aware, and your viewers are aware, of the number of times that I went to the police and showed them videos of people threatening my life. And the police were saying, no, you have to give us evidence. Here are the videos. You are watching them. People are threatening my life. How come you're not arresting them? People go about saying, if Edgar Lungu, may his soul rest in peace, comes to our province, we shall circumcise him. Were those people arrested? No. Huh? Some people say, if Edgar Lungu comes to our province, we shall kill him. Were they arrested? No. But if others just open their mouths and say anything against particular individuals, against particular groupings, they are arrested. And the record is there in court. What rule of law are you talking about? Huh? There is no rule of law in this country. We have slid into an anarchy. There's just anarchy in this country. What kind of rule of law is it?
Anarchy is a strong word to use.
It is
Unless
anarchy.
you justify that.
Yes, I can justify it. If the way that you treat one child is different from the way you treat another, what is it called? It's anarchy. And the country must treat its citizens fairly and equally. All of us are equal before the law. If there is a demonstration of the fact that others are untouchables for committing a similar crime for which others are arrested, then I'm afraid I've no other word to use. Look at what is happening in Parliament today. When members of Parliament stand in Parliament and they say, we are standing in defense of the Constitution on which we swore and for which we pledged our total loyalty to defend, what happens to them? They are suspended. Is that ruling by the rule of law? Is that governing by the rule of law? No. That is not governing by the rule of law. If you want to extend this argument, you can talk about corruption. Is corruption only historic? No. When others are arrested, or are being investigated by the Anti-Corruption Commission, statements are made. Such and such has been called. And for others, the Anti-Corruption Commission says, no, these ones we should not inform the public that we're investigating them, because if we do, we'll be jeopardizing their status and their integrity. How? For others, you can announce that this one has been summoned to come and answer charges. For others, no, you can't. Is that governing by the rule of law? No. What about the various scandals that we've been hearing about? We've heard about the Egypt gold scandal. Then you decide, no, this matter is going to be hush-hush. It will be in camera. The public must not know how this matter is going. It's in camera. When it comes to a witchcraft matter, you say, no, this one we even want cameras to come into the court. Is that governing by the rule of law? When it is a matter, like I said, to do with a scandal like that, you want the press away. When it comes to Edgar Lungu's eligibility case, you bring cameras in. Why these double standards? We hear of scandals such as the $20 million US dollar donation from America for maize. And the one who revealed it is a representative of the people who donated the money, Gonzalez himself. He told Zambians, he told all of us that we gave this government $20 million to import maize. But we realized that they were importing the maize at an inflated price. 20% higher, or was it 40% more than the prevailing market price? And that this maize, as a matter of fact, hasn't even arrived. We were hoping that the same ferocity with which they are going after others will also be used against those who are involved in that $20 million scandal. But no. And some people must say we're being governed by the rule of law? No. What about the artisanal miners, the gold miners? We have gotten stories, these stories have been everywhere, that there were people who were actually benefiting from those miners. They were extorting money from those miners. Those miners were killed. Huh? And some people want to cover that up. Have we heard any heads rolling about the people who are covering up the number of deaths? About the people who are alleged to have been extorting money from those poor miners? We haven't.
Let's talk about the state of the opposition in Zambia, and the Patriot Front still stands out as the largest opposition political party in Zambia due to the members of parliament you have at parliamentary level. In as much as you complain that the UPND may be failing in its duties, the question Zambians have right now is, what next? Because so far it seems, or it appears, that this country is lacking a viable opposition so far. If you talk about your party, it's in disarray as we speak right now. In your preamble, you did mention that up to now you are concerned because the court has not given you a direction on the status of the Patriot Front. What next?
Yes, it could be argued that our party is not where it should have been. But we have the explanation for that. And every Zambian, every discerning Zambian, everyone who is watching, who has been following these events, knows the reason why we are where we are. We are where we are because of the state-sponsored coup that was staged on the Patriotic Front on the 24th of October 2023. And you saw how even after we agreed with Miles, the state again quickly moved in and imposed another leader on the Registrar of Societies papers. And I'm being very careful not to even say impose the leader on the PF, because no one in the PF considers Chawinga as its leader. No. The ones who regard him as the leader is the UPND government through the Registrar of Societies. Discerning viewers will know that Miles Sampa was actually granted an order by court that he is president of the Patriotic Front. And that order was supposed to have been executed by Registrar of Societies. Up to now, Registrar of Societies is refusing to change the names to remove Chawinga and replace him with Miles Sampa. Now, we are where we are. And yes, we are not able to field candidates on the PF ticket. And that is affecting us as a political party. For 1 year, ever since the coup, you saw what happened. Soon after the coup, ECZ came up with a strange regulation without consulting with stakeholders, by the way. They came up with the regulation that if you are going to have candidates, the certificates, the adoption certificates must be signed by the president and the secretary general of the party. A thing which wasn't the case hitherto. Why did they do that? It is because they knew that if we were to sign, they would say, no, 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 you are not the president, because at the Resource Societies, the names are different. And for a year, we never participated in elections. And they had it easy. Okay? So the Patriotic Front, as a party, has been affected by that. Nonetheless, we told the citizens that we are not going to allow the decimation of democracy in Zambia. We are not going to allow that the UPND should determine how many political parties must participate in elections. We were fortunate that there were like-minded leaders of opposition political parties who decided, colleagues, let us work together. And that's how we formed first UCA and then Tonse Grand Alliance. And through the Grand Tonse Alliance, we've been participating in these elections. Yes, the results have been coming out, but it is very clear that those results are not a reflection of the will of the people. And we can illustrate, in many cases, how this is not the will of the people. But, again, to show you the harassment of political parties, and particularly the persecution of the Patriotic Front, what did the ECZ do with regard to Mfue? They even said, we don't even want to see the portrait of Edgar Chagwa Lungu in the campaign, because Edgar Chagwa Lungu is not on the ballot paper. We only need people on the ballot paper. But we were shocked. And I even raised the question, if you don't want PF regalia to be there because of Edgar Lungu, because the portrait is not the person on